from the region and covering this directly, this terrible war. But I think, as Tim said, in all wars and conflicts, journalists are at the fore, and journalists do get injured and killed. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and journalists have been killed there over the decades. But we have never seen anything like the slaughter of journalists which is taking place at the present time in Gaza. And does anybody believe it's all collateral damage, it's all by mistake, that the journalists aren't being targeted, just as hospitals, educational establishments and other public institutions and people's homes are being targeted? It beggars belief that there's not a conscious policy to take out journalists. And these journalists, what are they trying to do? They're trying to be as objective as possible in a war situation, collecting the facts and figures of the terrible terror being rained down on the people of Gaza and reporting that back to the world. And that is what the Israeli state does not want reported. And we have to stand firm with all those journalists working in Gaza and the whole region. And the International Journalists Federation, they have put out a statement correctly saying there's over 600,000 journalists in their organisation internationally, and as far as we're all concerned, they're all colleagues and comrades of ours wherever they are, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And when journalists are being targeted and attacked and killed, we have to say this is taking place. In our branch, in London Magazine branch, we have campaigned on this issue. We have put forward motions and resolutions. We have had some excellent meetings. One, for example, where we had a speaker, a Palestinian journalist, and the other speaker was a journalist from Israel. And both, in their own ways, are facing extremely difficult conditions. The journalist in Israel obviously doesn't face bombs raining down on him, but he faces persecution, marginalisation in a war situation, and yet he was able to report to our meeting how he and other media workers are doing all they can to try and get the truth out about what is happening in Gaza, but also what's happening in Israel. And I think it is our duty to try and make sure these reports and these voices are heard internationally. There's other speakers coming on next, so I'll just finish and say, as a trade unionist and as a socialist and as a journalist, I think we have to march and protest. I think today we're going to have a huge march once again. Where I live in Newham, there's almost daily marches and protests taking place. But I also think that every trade union has to look at itself and say, what more can we do? The speeches are great, the anger is great, the rhetoric is great, but there are trade unionists in this country and in America and other countries who work in the arms industry, and those arms have been shipped over at the moment to be used against the people of Gaza. Those trade unions involved in those industries need to have a discussion with their members. They need to raise an understanding of what's taken place. There needs to be ballots, in my opinion, and action, and we need to stop this war machine. The mass demonstrations and the action of trade unionists and the boycotts, well, that's what helped bring down the regime in South Africa, the apartheid regime. And we're going to have to do the same and use every method at our disposal and mass civil disobedience and campaigning to make sure that we can see an end to this terror. At the end of the day, it's 1% of the population of Gaza have been killed so far. I mean, it's just unthinkable, unthinkable. And no one stands beside the attacks against civilians on October the 7th. But this overall is an absolute bloodbath of the innocent. And therefore, as trade unionists, as journalists, we need to get the truth out there, and we need to do all we can to stop this terrible war machine. Thank you.
And I would like to commemorate them. My first personal shock in this conflict was Nidal al-Wahidi, friend of my cousin. He disappeared on the 7th of October. His family is still in contact with me. I don't know if he's alive or imprisoned. He just disappeared and we don't have an answer. Bilal Jadallah, the Palestinian journalist who sponsor in Baitul Sahafa 800 journalists. He was calling for our branch, London freelance branch, to collaboration to help them. His car was bombarded while he was trying to flee from north to south as he was ordered, and he was bombarded in his car, although the coordination with the Israelis. He lost all his families and he gone. We know about the steadiness of Wael al-Dahdouh. We all saw him goodbying his family. Do they know in Israel that there is so many Wael al-Dahdouh journalists who lost their families? How many journalists lost their families in Gaza? We don't know. In the same Al Jazeera team of Wael al-Dahdouh, Mu'min Sharafi lost more than 20% of his family, including nieces and nephews who are under 5 years old. Anas al-Sharif, who became Al Jazeera correspondent while the war, he was a freelancer. He is one of the most courageous journalists I have ever met. He's staying steady in the north. Greeting to you, Anas. He had been threatened to be killed if he didn't move to south. He said, I'm going to stay covering. They killed his father because he insisted to stay in the north, and he is still staying in the north. All our greetings to you, Anas. Yasser Abu Dakka, Al Jazeera cameraman, who was wearing his vest in a machine covering the rubble, have been bombarded, and we lost him after 6 hours waiting to be evacuated, bleeding. He didn't die from a missile. He died because he left to bleed to death. Mustafa Abu Soraya, unfortunately I met him when I was in Gaza. He was still a teen. Mustafa Abu Soraya, who is the main pilot, drone pilot in Gaza, he's the main one. He was covering for every newspaper and platform all over the world. He was with Hamza Dahdouh going to covering, and they were targeted and killed. And this wasn't enough. They have been accused them that they are terrorists. And the proof, the evidence was $240 payslip. And this is the evidence that they are terrorists. Ahmed Naouk, the Palestinian journalist who is based in the UK, I called him immediately after he lost all his families in a massacre. To support him, I genuinely said, Ahmed, I wish your remaining family are safe, and I wish that you are still contacting them. I still recall his response in my head every day. He responded, they all were killed. All of them, all in Naouk family was wiped. He's the only left person from Al Naouk. All of them were killed. I lost all of them. There is lots of families in Gaza have been wiped from the records. Totally, this regeneration, grandpas, fathers, mothers, and grandsons, all of them have been died. And all of this situation, there are still friends and colleagues are surviving. Sorry, it's not a shiny story to who survived. So, our friend, Dia Al-Kahlout, director of the New Arab Bureau, was taken. You saw the viral video of the naked men in the trunk. Dia Al-Kahlout, the journalist, was one of them. What happened when he told the Israeli people that he is a journalist? He had been tortured for 33 days asking and investigated about a report he had done in 2018. This is Gaza, but I wish it was any better in the West Bank. Mohammed Al-Atrash, who works for Al Jazeera, was arrested and subjected to torture. He was beaten and he is still under arrest and suffering from multiple fractures. Muaz Amarna, a journalist who have been covering a peaceful protest in 2019, he had got a shot in the head. Normal routine in Gaza, in Palestine. The bullet is still remaining in his skull and poses a threat on his life. Muaz told his lawyer this week that he sleeps in the floor, no mattress, no jackets, and the soldier is beating him every day. And they told him they knew that he might die if the bullet had been moved. But who cares? Sumaya Jawabra, who was 7 months pregnant when she was arrested. Sumaya, my dear colleague, gave birth while she was home arrest. Those are some stories around my community and my work, and I live them every day. Among over 120 journalists, I don't know how many of them I knew in person. Although we don't know the exact statistics about how many we lost, but I can confidently say any journalist in Gaza or in Palestine, he lost a beloved one, regardless he's a journalist or not. Hamza is not Bilal, and Mustafa Suraya is not Nidal. Every number counts, and every number is a story. They are intimidating us as journalists to stay silent. But when journalists are insulted, humiliated, assassinated, and actually butchered, we can't stay silent. We will stay solidly against anyone questioning a call for a ceasefire. So please call for a ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. And it's really hard to speak about my family and friends and colleagues after 4 months of being slaughtered and butchered. So excuse me if this was going to be a bit touching to me as a human, not as a journalist only. So lots of journalists like us like to go to conflict zones, running after stories and see how career challenging it is. But to who went to Ukraine, if any of you covered Ukraine, you know that we receive SMSs asking us to evacuate because this is going to be targeted with a missile or something. This is not how it works in Gaza. In Ukraine, you have SMS, you have a shelter to go there, but in Gaza, everyone is targeted. No warning in advance. It's enough to be a Palestinian, a civilian, a doctor, a journalist wearing a vest. That means nothing to the Israeli people. You might be targeted. A missile bombardment become extremely high technology used in Israel. We have AI, we have target by voice prints, we have Gospel, the AI program that can target journalists anywhere. But they are still surviving this technology. My last visit to Gaza was a decade ago, under bombardment, of course. My grandpa last visit to Gaza was in the 70s, so my network there is not that very big, but allow me to introduce to some of them who are still surviving.
I'm pleased to be here with you. We are in 2024 and still I'm standing in front this Stop Killing Journalist in Palestine. Can you imagine that? Hey BBC, can you hear us? We are in 2024 and asking to stop killing journalists. We are talking about civilians, about journalists, about our colleagues, our friends. And before I start to Mariam, we will never be silent. We will keep doing what we should do. This is our commitment. BBC, shame on BBC and CNN and other Western mainstream media. But this is not the case. The case is our colleague in Palestine. This should be a 5-minute speech, but to be honest, it could be a 5 hours or 5 days of telling stories of my friends, of my colleagues, in Gaza. We can spend the whole day and the next week and the next month talking about every single journalist have been killed in Gaza in the last 4 months. Our journalists, our colleagues in Gaza, they lost their beloved ones who have been targeted by Israeli forces, who have been killed among 122 journalists, according to the Gaza government media office. In 2024, in Gaza, Palestinian journalists are documenting their own genocide. This is the reality. This is the fact. This is what's going on in Gaza since October 7th. They are covering the news as any journalist, as many of us, we are covering the news. Then suddenly they are the news. They are the one who been killed, and we keep reporting and we keep covering their stories. In Gaza, journalists face extraordinary risks every day as they strive to document the realities of life during this conflict. Their dedication to shedding light on the stories that may otherwise remain untold is not only commendable but vital for the global understanding of the situation. They are our heroes, our idols. They are inspirational for all journalists around the world. For example, Wael al-Dahdouh, Al Jazeera Gaza bureau chief, whose wife, son, daughter, grandson were killed in an Israeli airstrike in October. Wael al-Dahdouh was later wounded in an Israeli drone attack that killed his colleague Al Jazeera cameraman Saber Abu Dakka. And last month, his eldest son Hamza, another journalist in Gaza, another Palestinian brave journalist who worked with Al Jazeera as well, was killed in an Israeli attack alongside fellow journalist Mustafa Thuraya. Wael said, and I quote, "Hamza was not just part of me, he was the whole of me. He was the soul of my soul. These are tears of sadness. These are tears of loss. These are tears of humanity." Wael later forced to leave Gaza to have an immediate surgical procedure to save his injured hand. Many of Palestinian journalists, as Mariam said, lost their families, relatives and friends. They displaced from their homes. Anas al-Sharif lost his father. Momin al-Sharafi lost his family. And Mu'taz Azaiza, we all know Mu'taz. We all follow Mu'taz with his 17 million followers on Instagram. He has followers more than Joe Biden. And this is a fact, a Palestinian journalist. However, Mu'taz got a threat from an Israeli intelligence officer, and we will target you because you are covering stories in Gaza. For many years we have learned, we have inspired by courageous journalists who have lost their lives during their jobs as journalists on war zone and front lines. For example, David Blanty, shot by a sniper on a street in El Salvador in 1989. And Mary Colvin, the brave Mary Colvin, killed by shelling in Syria in 2012. And in 2003, there is a familiar story here in the United Kingdom. Israeli soldier shot dead the British documentary cameraman James Miller in Gaza. An inquest in the UK returned the verdict of unlawful killing, and Israel did pay 1.5 million in compensation. And Miller's family got a payout because simply he was British. As we all know, unfortunately, dead Western journalists create more waves globally than Palestinian journalists, and this is a shame. And this is clearly one of the reasons Israel locked the foreign press out of Gaza during the present war. The number of journalists killed in the last 4 months has surpassed the number killed during the Second World War. Can you imagine that? And also it's more than around half the number of those killed in Iraq war over 9 years, just in 4 months. A vest, a camera, and a mic have never been weapons, have never considered as weapons. These are our commitment to journalism. These are our honor as journalists. This should be our protection in war zone. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case in Gaza right now. An attack on journalists is simply an attack on democracy. And it's our duty to advocate for the safety and protection of those who dedicate their lives to keeping us informed. We are calling here to an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and we are calling for protection of Palestinian journalists in Gaza and granting access to international media to report from Gaza, and also an international investigation of Israeli attacks and ending the impunity. Thank you.
And international media empires issuing an edict from the boardroom: we will not criticise Israel, no title will criticise Israel. And the journalists there really in fear of their jobs just for trying to present the truth or a balance or two sides of an argument. So that's what we're up against, right? We're trying to get media workers for Palestine going in a big way, because we need people in every newsroom, in every publication, on every website, to feel confident that they can stand up and say, we're reporting the truth. That's all we want. And when the world sees the truth, then they know that Palestine should be free, that Gaza should be free, that what Israel's committing is genocide. That takes some organisation. So on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. we'll be back here to kick off Media Workers for Palestine. There'll be events taking place in Manchester, in Birmingham and in Glasgow at the same time. And anybody who's a media worker, write into us and let's try and build the networks, because we know in every community, 80% of the population want a ceasefire now. Most of the people who want a ceasefire now want justice for the Palestinians. And media workplaces are no different from the wider community. So let's try and get some organisation. That's what we're trying to do. Thank you for being here. The protest is going to be really big and really important, and we're going to keep on fighting, and Media Workers for Palestine will keep on fighting. Thanks.
To have been very supportive during this very critical time. I remember his words to me when we started to get very would like to go first. So we have a very big surprise here. So I would like to introduce you first, Benjamin, who would say some words for us and losing a journalist, and then we're going to applaud our journalist. So Benjamin, would you come please?
Thank you. Listen, thank you all for being here. It's really important we're all here to march again, but this demonstration that you're undertaking is also important. You don't need me to tell you about the death toll of journalists in Gaza, and it's been underreported. It's an aspect of the genocide that Israel has unleashed upon the people of Gaza, and it's important that we're doing this in the location we're doing it. I've been involved in campaigning for justice for the Palestinians for many years. I've never been naive about the complicit role of news organisations like the BBC, but in the past 3 months I think that has reached a nadir, and maybe the lowest point was when Israel was finally charged with the crime of genocide, the crime of crimes in the world's highest court, and the BBC decided not to report on the day when South Africa laid the evidence before the court, but the next day to live stream Israel's defense against those charges. So listen, we know, you'll also know, we are marching once again today from the BBC to Whitehall, the seat of government. You will know that the Met Police tried to stop us marching to Whitehall, and we would not yield to that, and we are marching to the seat of government. We have a fundamental right to protest in this country, but today is not about our rights. We will not be deflected from our core message. We are marching because there is a genocide that is still being unleashed upon the people of Gaza. We are marching because today in Gaza there are 1.7 million Palestinians displaced, sheltering wherever they can in the rain. You will have all seen the photographs of Palestinian children, dystopian photographs of Palestinian children trying to sleep in mud-laden tents. And today in Gaza, as every day, according to the evidence presented by South Africa to the ICJ, a fact I cannot process or get out of my mind, every day in Gaza at the moment, 10 Palestinian children are having one or both legs amputated without anaesthetic. That's why we're marching. That's why we will continue to march, and we are also marching because we know history didn't begin on October the 7th. We know this genocide is built upon the foundations of decades of military occupation and of 75 years of ethnic cleansing, of colonization, and the imposition upon all of the Palestinian people of a system of apartheid. On Christmas Day, the Palestinian priest Munza Isaac delivered a sermon in Bethlehem, and he said this, he said, "Gaza as we know it no longer exists. This is a genocide. This is an annihilation. The Palestinian people will rise up from the midst of the destruction as they have always done." But this was the test he put to the world. He said, "I want you all to look in the mirror and ask yourself this question: what did I do when Gaza was going through a genocide?" Our political leaders are failing that basic moral test. They are green-lighting genocide. All of you are refusing to be silent, are refusing to turn away, and you are undertaking the first and most fundamental act of solidarity, which says to an oppressed people, I see you, I hear you, I stand with you. So as a Palestinian, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for what you're doing. We march again, and we will not stop marching. We will not stop protesting. We will not stop boycotting until a ceasefire is called, until the occupation is ended, until the entire system of apartheid is dismantled, and until the Palestinian people are finally free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben Jamal, head and founder of Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. And I would like to complete his speech and saying that the priests in Gaza said, if every mosque had been demolished and being a rubble, we are going to raise azan from the church. And otherwise, Imam said, if every church had been demolished and there is a real ethnic cleansing to Christian at the moment going in Gaza, we are going to raise the prayer of Christians from the mosques. And here we are in front of BBC building in London. I want to tell my friends and journalists in Gaza and in Palestine, we are here for you. And it's the same what happened in Egypt when they are targeting the mosque. They said here in Al-Qahira, Huna, Damascus. I'm here saying in front of the BBC building in London, in middle of the capital of London, who are deaf and not hearing us and staying silent. Huna Gaza, Huna Gaza. Say after me, we are here in front of BBC, Huna Gaza, we are Gaza. We are going to raise your voice. You're going to be killed, we are going to speak. You're going to be targeted, we are going to tell your story. Here, Huna Gaza from London, for all my friends in Palestine, Huna Gaza, we're not going to die. No one is going to ethnic cleanse us. We're going to be here forever, raising your voice till the last minute of our lives. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.